Hi everyone, this is Intermediate Music Theory, Lesson 4. We're going to be talking about key signatures and why they're important. So we're going to use musictheory.net. We're going to go to the lessons and we're going to take the key signatures lesson from scales and key signatures. So let's go ahead and click on that. So, a key signature is just a collection of every accidental found in a scale. Basically, we're going to take all the accidentals that are needed to make major or minor scales, and we're going to put them together. And we're going to put them together at the beginning of the staff. So we're going to go through some examples to see what that means. So, let's talk about C minor, for example. So, in the key of C minor, which we have right here, we have three flats, one for E flat, A flat, and B flat. Now, instead of writing flats in front of every note every time, if we have a piece of music that's going to be in C minor for a while, it's a good idea to basically remove the accidental symbols from next to the note and put them in the middle, or not in the middle, but at the beginning of the staff, so that we don't have to keep writing them over and over again, right? So this is just a convenience feature of notation that was invented to make it easier and faster to not only write music, but to read music. So instead of writing the flats next to every E, A, and B, we can just add the key signature to the beginning of the measure. In this case, because this is the only measure we have, you don't have to add the key signature at the beginning of each measure. If the key is not changing, you can just put it at the beginning of each staff. You only need to put it at the beginning of a measure if the key is changing to something new. Okay? So now let's talk about D flat major. This one also is a key with flats. And we have D flat, E flat, G flat, A flat, B flat, and back to D flat. We don't count the last D flat, we already counted it once. So we are gonna do the key signature here, and we're gonna write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flats at the beginning of the staff. So you see, when we have a key signature, we remove them from the left of the notes and we just put them at the beginning of the staff. And just to make it very clear, when we have a key signature, it's always assumed, it's always understood that every time that a note that has a flat or a sharp in the key signature appears, is going to have that accidental. For example, in this case here, G flat, every time that we see G flat on the staff and we have a key signature that has a G flat, every time that a G occurs is going to be G flat unless we write something in front of it to change it temporarily. And we'll get into some of those things in other lessons, but just remember for now that the key signature always shows us that the notes, when they appear, they're going to be altered either by a flat or by a sharp. So I could write another G down the line later, and that G would also be by default a G flat, okay? Now, you may have noticed from the last two examples that we were ordering the flats in a special order, right? And key signatures do in fact have very specific ordering. Both flat keys and sharp keys are key signatures are written in a very specific order. So let's talk about the flats first. So B flat is first, and just to mention this, the key signatures are read from left to right. So we start with this note and we move on to the next one on the right, next one on the right, next one. So we go from left to right, both in flats and sharps. So the first one, which is the leftmost, is B flat. And B flat is always going to be the first flat from any of the flat keys. Then we're going to have E flat, a perfect fourth above. Next one is A flat, a fifth, perfect fifth below the previous note. Then D flat, perfect fourth above. G flat, perfect fifth below the previous one. So there's kind of a pattern happening here, if you guys can see. This is a perfect fourth, perfect fifth down, perfect fourth up, perfect fifth down. And that's kind of how the flat keys work. So the next two notes are C flat and F flat. And C flat and F flat are interesting because if you recall from the keyboard, and I actually have it pulled up here, C natural and F natural are already separated by E natural and the B natural by a half step. So when we make C natural flat, we're bringing down a half step. So in reality, C flat is going to be the same pitch as B natural, but they're just written differently. And there are reasons for this that we will discuss as we go through lessons. There is a reason why we would basically describe the same pitch, which is this sound, this note, as either B natural or C flat. But it's a little bit confusing at first because in other accidentals it's very easy because, for example, D flat is going to be the black keys, but in this case there is no black key in between because the naturals are already separated by a half step. So it can be a little bit confusing. Same thing with F natural, F flat. F natural, we bring that down to F flat. That's also the same pitch as E natural. So it's the same pitch, same sound, but they're written differently. And this is what's called an enharmonic spelling. This is just a little bit of a term that is used in music theory. So if you want to know what that's called, an enharmonic spelling is just writing the same pitch with a different note name. It's the same idea of the fact that we can have E flat or D sharp. D sharp and E flat are the same pitch, but they're different in harmonic spellings because we're using different letters to describe it. Okay, so don't worry too much about that detail for now. I just want you to be familiar with that term. But you, as we do more lessons, like I said before, you'll understand why those differences exist. So you can remember this order by using, a combination of words. This is not how I learned this when I was a kid, but it can be useful to you. They have this mnemonic called "Battle ends and down goes Charles' father." So B, E, A, D, G, C, F. You can make up your own, whatever you like that makes you remember it. When I was a kid, I learned something called solfege, which is calling note names by a different name. So C would be called do, D would be called re, and so on. And so I learned this as si, mi, la, re, sol, do, fa. If you've ever heard solfege, you might be familiar with this. But you can use whatever method you want that helps you remember. It doesn't really matter as long as you find a way that it sticks, something that really clicks with you. Okay, so let's talk about the sharp keys. So we have key signatures that use sharps instead of flats. For example, A major has 3 sharps: C sharp, F sharp, G sharp. So same idea here. We're going to take those accidentals, and rather than put them at the left of each note, we're going to switch them to the beginning of the staff. and we're going to take them out of, we're going to take them away from being to the left of the notes. Now, these are still, once again, remember that these are still sharp, even though they don't have the sharp written to the left of it. It's in the key signature, so every time that note happens in the staff, and it's in the key signature, it's going to be a sharp. So this is F sharp, this is G sharp, this is C sharp. Just remember that, very important. So let's do E major. E major has F sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and D sharp. That's 4 sharps. So once again, we move them to the beginning of the staff, and we end up with that. Okay, great. So just like the flats had an order, sharps have a specific order as well. We start with F sharp, and specifically in this line, not this F sharp, but we write it here on this octave. And I should mention, this is also important for the flat keys. Not only the order is important, but where you put the accidental in the key signature is important. Just like we had B flat as the first flat before, has to be B flat in the third line, cannot be B flat down here below the first ledger line. Very important where you put it too. So we start with F sharp in this line, and then next is C sharp, and if we follow the interval relationships, which we did before, this one's going to be slightly different. So here from F sharp down to C sharp, we go down a perfect fourth. Next one is G sharp, and G sharp is up a perfect fifth from C sharp. Next one is D sharp. D sharp is down a perfect fourth from G sharp. So you see that's the pattern, starting on F sharp, down a perfect fourth, up a perfect fifth, down a perfect fourth, and the next one's going to be up a perfect fifth to A sharp. Now, I said that we were going to go up a perfect fifth. The reason why this A sharp is written here and not up here is because we would have had to add a ledger line. And in key signatures, we don't add ledger lines, so we avoid doing that. So if we have to add, if we would have had to add a ledger line here for the A sharp. So instead of doing that, we brought it down. So in this case, because of where the A sharp is placed, we're actually going down a perfect fourth. But when you think about it, A sharp in this octave is going down a perfect fourth from here, but if we had put it on the octave above, it would have been a perfect fifth above. But we're going to write it down here just because it's convenient. And that's just the rule that was created to make it the same, conventional, so that it doesn't get confusing for anybody. Finally, we have E sharp, which is up a perfect fifth from A sharp, and then the final B sharp up down a perfect fourth from E sharp. Okay, and these are also, it's also worth going back to the keyboard to show you that E sharp, if we go to E natural, if we raise that a half step, E sharp is the same pitch as F natural, but they're just spelled differently. In harmonic spelling is different, but it's the same pitch. So remember, E sharp is F natural in terms of pitch, and B sharp, this is B natural. Raise that a half step, we have B sharp, which is also can be written as C natural, okay? But it's the same pitch. Okay, so here musictheory.net has a mnemonic for the sharp order. They have father child goes down and ends battle. So there is a father F, child C, goes G, down D, and A, ends E, battle B. I learned it in solfege, and I always remember the order fa, do, sol, re, la, mi, si. But if you're not familiar with solfege and you never heard it, you don't have to worry about that. Just remember, if you don't like this mnemonic, you can come up with your own, one that you like. So it's entirely up to you. Okay, cool. So this is a chart of the key signatures with all the accidentals in order for both treble clef. So these are all our flats in treble clef and all our sharps in treble clef. And same deal in bass clef. We have all our flats and all our sharps. So, while you're learning how to write key signatures and read key signatures, you can refer to this sheet so that you can get familiar with the order, and not just the order, but where they're placed. There are some changes that are made along the way in some of the key signatures. The flats are always consistent. They always go in the same direction, but the sharps, sometimes we drop down an octave to make them work, just like we talked about before. So anyway, so key signatures is important because it's not just a way for us to avoid having to write accidentals all the time next to notes. We can just kind of make it simpler to write music and read. But it's also a quick way to tell which key a piece or a section of a piece is in. If you look at a key signature, you can recognize which key that is. And I should also mention something very important, that the key signatures are made to match the accidentals in major keys and natural minor keys only. So natural minor scales are the only ones that count as far as writing the key signature. Harmonic minor and melodic minor scales do not count for key signatures, because in harmonic minor we have to raise that 7th degree by a half step. And oftentimes that actually creates an accidental that is different from the key signature, where sometimes we'll have a key signature that's all flats, but in order to make the 7th degree higher, we have to make it a sharp. And we can never have key signatures that combine flats and sharps in the same key signature. We never have any keys, any major or natural minor scales that combine accidentals in the key signature. So be really mindful of that. So melodic and harmonic minor do not count for key signatures, only natural minor. So this is the last bit of important information about that. Practice looking at a couple key signatures and you'll get pretty comfortable with them. And in a future video, we're going to talk about how we can figure out any key from just looking at its key signature. This is a very useful thing to be able to just understand very quickly the key of any given portion of the music. That can be very helpful for learning a piece or being able to sing a piece, or when you listen back, you can write it if you know the key signatures well. Okay, so this is it for this lesson. Just get familiar with this, get some practice with it. Key signatures are a little bit tricky at first, but if you follow this pattern and these rules, it will get pretty easy very quickly. All right, guys, have a good evening. Take care.